Welcome back to part 2 of Gender and Pay, on the hunt ever for those elusive sources of the gender pay gap. All right, Gender Inequality part 2. So as you remember, we're looking at different theories about why gender pay gap exists, why women earn on average 80% of what men earn. So moving on from gendered cultural expectations and discrimination, let's talk about human capital. So the sort of neoclassical economic analysis and model that might explain some of this. So we can utilize the labor supply and labor demand curve market theory that we have built up. Let's assume we are talking about normal upward sloping labor supply curve and normal downward sloping labor demand curve. Now remember, the labor demand curve comes from firms. Firms are the ones demanding labor, and they demand labor based on the marginal revenue product or the value of the marginal product, how much revenue that worker generates. And as a reminder, human capital is just that set of skills, training, education, anything that enhances your productivity. It may be something that you're naturally born with, like being born 7 feet tall gives you some human capital that other people don't have if you're going to play in the NBA. Speaking of NBA, we'll start with sports. It's a nice, easy way to see this theory alive. Women and men earn different wages in sports. Productivity is part of the reason. So if we establish that this demand curve is a function of labor's productivity, let's look at this demand curve as being the demand curve for males. So there's an equilibrium wage and quantity coming up with the demand for male NBA players or male soccer players. What about women? WNBA players or female soccer players, maybe women's national cup team for soccer, compared to their male counterparts, where would you place the demand curve for their labor? So it's not a straightforward answer, because when you ask about productivity of something, you have to keep in mind that productivity and revenue generation of the worker for her firm is dependent not just on her own productivity, but also on the popularity or demand or selling price of the product. So when you ask what is the productivity of male versus female soccer players, it's more than just number of goals scored. In fact, we could generate a condition where both men and women were scoring the same amount of goals, but the men are paid more because each goal generates more ticket sales. So the men's goals are each worth more than the women's. They're generating more revenue for their team, and the team has more money to pay them. So labor is a derived demand. It exists as a derivation from the demand for the good that the workers are producing. And society can have different valuation for the goods that men versus women are producing. So to some degree, the wage for women and men reflect the discrimination and gender bias of society. Now, this is not to say that it's fair or not fair. Many of us would consider that a level of unfairness. But it's not just academic. There are questions before courts right now, specifically about the U.S. women's national team for soccer, about this very issue. But back to the problem. How would you show that difference in pay on this graph? Let's make this pink line the labor demand curve for females. Should it be below, above? Where do you think? I'll let you decide. And the answer in 3, 2, 1, boom. And you will have the resultant lower wage and lower amount of people hired in the women's market compared to the men's. To bring your attention quickly over to the assumptions I sort of slipped in, we are assuming that similar skill level jobs pay workers equally regardless of gender at this point, and that it's relatively easy to measure the productivity of a worker. But of course, it's not always clear that those conditions are being met. That equally productive people are earning the same wage is not always true. There's other stuff going on, right? And if people are equal contributors to revenue, doesn't necessarily mean they're going to get paid the same. But in our simplified economic models, that's how it works. And it is not always easy to measure the productivity of a worker, especially in management professions. How do you count the number of widgets a widget worker makes if she is just managing a widget team. Okay, so on that theme of it being kind of hard to observe the productivity of a given worker, let's think about shortcuts that firms use to observe when they can't really observe. So, for instance, if you knew that a person had a degree from Cal Poly and somebody else didn't, somebody else perhaps only had a high school degree, would that give you a hint of the productivity of the two? That's our going assumption, that education is being used as a proxy for the productivity of a worker, so that workers with degrees are considered to be higher productivity than workers without. We could debate this. In fact, there's pretty serious debate about the value of education. So a little existential exercise for you. What is the value of your college degree? Does it add meaningful productivity? Or is it more about sorting already productive people from their less productive peers? In which case you want to think about the investment, right? Why do some people go to college? Maybe it's to get skills, sure. Maybe it's because it's a signal to employers. And maybe that investment, that 4 years or whatever, as a signal to employers only makes sense for some people for whom they were already more productive, could already handle school, whatever. They were already going to be more productive and useful to firms anyway. And then, of course, this brings up, I think, a very important and much larger question. What is the purpose of education? Is it just to make better workers, better machines that fit in the machinery of the economy? Or is it something different? I vote for B. All right. Whew, that was a lot of thinking. Okay, so let's consider then that education is valuable. Let's talk about it as a signal to employers. Whether or not it actually adds value is immaterial. They believe that it does. So some people might earn more because they are more productive down to education, which is true, right? You expect that MDs earn more than PAs because the medical doctor has more years of schooling than a physician's assistant. And that does hold up. Does that explain everything? Well, you can look at some gender disparity in wages here. And these are for equally educated people. So it looks as if, although engineering and jobs that require sort of more schooling or more rigorous schooling, maybe even, will earn a higher wage, it doesn't explain the difference between the male and female wages there. Unless you think that women are somehow getting slightly less educated than men in most of these majors, it's simply not true. In fact, women are now more represented than men in undergraduate, graduate degrees, both master's and PhD, and they generally get higher grades than men in all of those. And I'm just going to slide right over this slide, but you can take a look and pause if you want and look at the different outcomes on race and ethnicity as well. But it is worth looking at for the idea of education, more education, adding to more productivity, adding to higher wages as part of the story, but not all of the story. Is this changing over time? Indeed, it is. So the younger you are, the lower the gender pay gap. So you're probably wondering, well, how can we figure out how much is down to human capital and how much is not? Turns out there are some academics and some think tanks, this is the Center for Equitable Growth, that are doing this research. Among Hispanic women, the pay gap between men and women is much larger. And if you add to that the distance between a Latina's pay and a white man's pay, the difference is even greater. So you're adding to gender ethnicity. So you're looking here at things that we can measure and we know contribute to pay differences that are explanatory. Age, right? As you're older, you tend to earn more. Education level, that should count, and indeed we do see that it's counting. Location, where you're at, certain jobs in certain locations pay more. Occupation and industry. But the interesting parts are the unexplained. There's nothing in labor market theory that's measurable that we can attribute to the wage difference. So unexplained pay premiums for white men and unexplained pay penalties for Latinas show up in these orange boxes. So they're probably down to maybe discrimination maybe, or workplace segregation. So either discrimination between men and women in the same job or discrimination between jobs. Women take certain types of jobs, pink-collar jobs, we call them, and men are normally taking different kinds of jobs. And there the two shall meet. And as you can guess, citizenship status also matters. So diving deeper into the data, they found that the unexplained variables count more for non-citizens. And what about feedback effects? If you know that more education has higher payoff, and it's fairly stable, right? The benefits here of the explained part of white men's premium stay stable as you continue with more education. But for Latinas, it's actually unstable. So notice how the pay does shrink as you go, but it's unclear that education alone is doing it. In fact, the pay gap shrinks here, but education is less of the story, and unexplained pay gap is more of the story. And then it reverses here. And also that payoff just isn't all that much there. So how much education would you do if you were her? So we want to think about educational incentives as we think about inequality, as we think about pay gaps, as we think about intergenerational mobility. We want to think about people being fairly rational creatures, making decisions that make sense. So let's walk through this. The feedback effects, right? So human capital theory says that if workers' value to her employer is down to the productivity and the value of the product. Now remember, this is perceived productivity. And there may be bigotry or there may be discrimination amongst employers about women's productivity. And then also there may be stuff that society is valuing less that women do than men. This is our soccer example. So the value of the product to society is out of her control. Her productivity is somewhat under her control. The perception of her productivity, not so much. So we want to think about all this together, leading to maybe some of the reasons for lower wages for women. And then the feedback effects are that if she gets less of a payoff for education than her male counterparts, she will, of course, as a rational human being, demand less. The good news is that this is changing. The pay gap is narrowing so that the difference in pay and incentives for women and men to get educated is shrinking. But it is historically and in a big, very, very large legacy way, still part of the current wage structure and women's current, even your current opportunities.